let's start with this. If we could just break down this year's legislative session a little bit and perhaps answer this core question. Does the state emerge from this session stronger than it was before?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think in some measures, yes, in others, no. So I'll try to elaborate on that. I think that with respect to, let's look at higher education, for example. The legislature did make some good financial investments in higher education. Across the board funding increases, both for four-year universities and for community colleges, as well as a new fund that the voters will have a chance to approve this fall that will benefit, among other systems, the University of North Texas system. So I think those are positive things. I think in that sense, higher education is stronger after the session than before the session. Although I have to point out that with the good came some bad, in my opinion, including a ban on diversity, equity, and inclusion policies in higher ed, as well as a tenure bill that was simply unnecessary. But on balance, a good session for higher education, with those two things being the exception. In contrast, however, if you look at public education, K through 12, it was a terrible session for public education. With a $33 billion surplus, the state didn't allocate one additional dime to our public schools for classroom instruction. And so the basic allotment, which is the primary way we fund education, was not increased, and teachers didn't get a pay raise, and other educators didn't get a pay raise. So that was a failure. On a couple other issues, I think there were some positive developments on mental health care in terms of more funding in the state budget, but again, the state failed to expand Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act, which is the single most important thing we could do, and bring insurance coverage to more than 1 million Texans. And then I think on the electric grid, there were some measures passed that I don't think will be harmful, but I'm afraid are not going to provide, in the end, the necessary help that we need to make sure our grid is robust and fully functional for the future. So I would say it's a mixed bag.
Mm-hmm. And looking into that mixed bag and moving a little bit into that question, what legislation did you specifically work on that you're most proud of from this session?
Sure. Well, worked on several different issue areas. So in no particular order. One that I'm very proud of that was just signed into law this week was a measure to reform group homes and other similar facilities that care for IDD individuals. And that's individuals with intellectual and developmental disability. We saw a variety of problems in group homes where residents were left in unsafe conditions for a variety of reasons. And so I passed legislation to require more robust background checks for the workers who care for these vulnerable individuals, and legislation that requires the automatic suspension of a caregiver who's been found guilty, essentially, of misconduct. And misconduct meaning neglect or abuse of a resident of a home. And prior to now, someone could be have found to have committed such a violation, but they can simply appeal the finding and continue working, and that's wrong. So I'm proud of those reforms we passed. In addition, I passed legislation to help address the opioid and fentanyl crisis by requiring overdose mapping. That is, when a public health entity or emergency response entity responds to an overdose, that the location of the overdose is put into a software program that is a free service that's shared with law enforcement, public health officials, and others, while protecting the privacy of the individual and the specific location, gives it gives first responders and others an idea of geographically where overdoses are occurring, so they can respond and try to intervene. I think that's going to make a difference and hopefully save lives. Um, we have legislation sitting on the governor's desk right now that I'm hopeful he'll sign here in the next couple of days to prohibit a homeowners association from discriminating against someone who is renting a property based on the method of payment. And this arose actually out of a case out of Denton County where an HOA had told its homeowners that they could not rent their homes if the rental payment was being paid by a Section 8 voucher. And Section 8 HUD vouchers in this case were predominantly used by women and by African Americans. And so clearly had a very discriminatory effect. I think there was a discriminatory intent as well. So I passed legislation to outlaw that practice, and look forward to the governor's signature on that. So we worked on a variety of other things as well, but those are a few of the things I'll highlight right now.
Absolutely. And if you'll excuse the noise, sounds like they started some construction outside my apartment, maybe
Oh,
right as this interview started. So if you
no,
notice
no
any
problem. I
crackles or
don't hear it.
pops,
I don't hear it. So
okay, perfect. One thing that passed without your support was HB 2127, what they're calling the Death Star bill, that will strictly limit regulations passed by cities and counties. I heard an interview where one Democratic representative called it, let's see, the end of local control in Texas. How do you view that bill? And more importantly, I suppose, how did the stakeholders in your community, like Mayor Jensen, Mayor Ross, the local government officials, how are they viewing that bill?
yeah, well, I strongly oppose that bill, both in the committee, State Affairs Committee that I sit on, and then on the House floor. Actually, led the fight against it on the House floor, and we tried several different ways to lessen the impact of that bill. While there were a few concessions made, for example, grandfathering in existing payday lending ordinances, like we do have in Arlington and Grand Prairie, that I work with local leaders to adopt. It is still a dramatic overreach. Um, and I'm very concerned about it. I think that it is seriously going to erode a lot of aspects of local control in Texas. And, look, our cities are different. Our cities are unique, and they're supposed to be. And people, choose to live in Grand Prairie because they like certain things Grand Prairie has to offer. Other people may choose to live in Frisco or Benbrook or Denton or Dallas because they like what those cities have to offer. So, one size doesn't fit all, but that's what it seems like Republicans in Austin wanted to create as a one-size-fits-all policy for the whole state that simply is big government at its worst. And you know, I remember Republicans used to claim they were the party of small government and limited government, but they become the party of big government and big government overreach. And this bill's going to have a pretty dramatic impact on people who live in cities across the state of Texas, I fear.
And of course, the big development of this session was the impeachment of the Attorney General, Ken Paxton. For those that follow this, we've been somewhat aware that the Attorney General has been allegedly, doing crimes for some time now. So I guess my question is, why now for the Republican leadership to look into this and act on this?
Yeah, got a great question. I mean, I've been calling for years for the legislature to investigate the Attorney General because there have just been so many instances of alleged impropriety, dating back to his indictments that are now 8 years old, where he's been indicted on felony counts 3 times, or 3 different charges. Of course, the issue with the whistleblowers and the whistleblowers being terminated and their allegations of what he did to help a donor and someone who was under federal investigation and now has been charged federally that Paxton was using his office to help this donor. And then there's the other issues that weren't even brought up in the impeachment. Um, where I think he's abused his office, such as trying to overturn the presidential election in 2020. The lawsuit that was thrown out of the U.S. Supreme Court because it was so absurd. And so, I think that the reason it happened now, and it's in the category better late than never, is because in the instance of the whistleblowers, Paxton had reached a settlement agreement with them and was asking the legislature to fund the settlement of $3.3 million. And the legislature balked at that, and the General Investigating Committee, I think, said, okay, if there's going to be a settlement agreement, we need to understand more about the circumstances around that. And so then that's what caused them to begin their investigation, which then led to the impeachment process.
And just to move a little from, policy and move a little into politics, I know in the 18, the 2020, the 2022 elections, Democrats had pretty high expectations, maybe flipping the Texas House, maybe beating some of these incumbents. Um, with the mixed results of those elections, what do you think's the expectations heading into 2024 for Texas Democrats?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'll say, back in 2017 or so, no one would have thought that Democrats would be in contention for control of the Texas House anytime soon. But we worked hard in 2018 and picked up 12 seats in the House that year. It was a very good election for us, and we were in striking distance in 20, and 20 election turned out to be a wash. We basically came out with the same number of seats that we went in with, and then with redistricting last time we lost 3 seats total, but it was largely a status quo election. So I think in 2024. You're going to see a number of competitive districts around the state. And it's a presidential year, which means that typically that is good for turnout for Democratic voters. And I think you'll see some good candidates running across the state in different districts. Now, as I said, redistricting has changed the equation somewhat from 2018 and 2020, in that Republicans used their power in 2021 during the redistricting process to artificially inflate their numbers in the House map, as well as I would add the Senate map and the congressional map, to basically hang on to power in a way that is far in excess of their actual voting strength in the state of Texas. Because you know, statewide results clearly show, Texas is certainly still a Republican state, but not by the margin that it was 10 years ago. So the redistricting map provides an additional challenge. And unfortunately, what they did in redistricting, they achieved that in redistricting by, in my view, discriminating against voters of color in many places around the state, and denying Black and Hispanic and Asian Texans from having a fair opportunity to elect candidates of their choice in many areas. And so those are some of the challenges. But that said, I think 2024 has the potential to be a really good year. I think that the U.S. Senate race with Ted Cruz on the ballot, and I believe that Colin Allred will be the Democratic nominee, who I'm endorsing and supporting, and he's an excellent candidate. I think it's going to make for some very competitive races down ballot, including in the state house.
And as we start to wrap this up, given some of the headwinds that Democrats face that you just described, how would you rate the performance of the House caucus this session? I know you've led the caucus before, so just as a whole, how would you rate the performance?
Look, I think Democratic members in the House know how to fight, and we're used to being outnumbered, and we're used to having to work harder and smarter to be able to get some things done, and to stop some bad things. And look, I think we had a lot of members of our caucus step up and work hard to derail some bad legislation, to soften the blow of some bad legislation, and to pass some good legislation. I'll give you a good example of a good health care bill that passed by Representative Tony Rose in Dallas, and this extended Medicaid coverage for new moms from what the current law is, which is 2 months, which is absurd, to a full 12 months, which is the very least we can do. But that was a hard bill to pass, and Tony's worked on it for a long time, and she got it done. So I think, look, I think our members are doing great, and we need more members to be able to fight even more effectively. But I'm proud to be part of the Democratic caucus.
And I'll close with this. I know you're currently adjourned from the House right now, but is it your expectation that you'll be called back to Austin for a few more special sessions this summer?
Well, only the governor knows how many that's going to be, but yeah, I do expect we'll be back at some point. There's at least two things I think that are still outstanding. One is this ongoing fight on property taxes, which is really remarkable to watch the governor, lieutenant governor, and Republican leadership in the House, kind of at odds with one another. about the best way to cut taxes, which, I always thought Republicans could agree on pretty easily. And so I'm not sure how that's going to end up. But that may require us going back at some point. But the governor has also said pretty clearly that he's going to call a special session on education. And what that means is vouchers. He's trying to pass his private school voucher plan, which a lot of us, myself included, vehemently oppose, and will do anything we can to stop it. So I don't know what the timing of that will be exactly, but I do expect that to happen sometime over the next few months.
And with that, that's State Representative Chris Turner. Representative Turner, thank you so much for joining the program.
Thank you for having me on today. I appreciate it.